somehow, I was one of those people who got to January or February of my senior year and I hadn't made any plans for life after. And I wanted to write fiction, but I didn't know how I would do that. And I didn't want to have to live at home. And, it was one of those, what do I do now? And a friend of mine who was at Cambridge said, an American who was at Cambridge, who had been at Yale, said, you should apply to Cambridge. And I said, well, I've missed the deadline. And he said, oh, with Americans, they don't care. So this was not scholarships. This was, hitting my dad up for 2 more years. And of course, because, precisely because, it is a very sort of, I shouldn't say this on tape, I guess, but I think it's a fairly sleazy deal where they like the cash, they like cash up front. It's not credit. It's not some government subsidy, nothing. They get some money. So of course they take all comers with the Americans. Yeah. So I went, but I had this idea that I wouldn't concentrate on my studies. I'd be able to write fiction, but I was so affronted by the powerful anti-American sentiment. I was told in the first week, you Americans, you're all a bunch of uncommitted dilettantes, and by a professor, not by a fellow student, by a professor. And I was so cross that I thought, I actually have to pull my weight and try to do well. So I actually didn't write very much when I was there, and it wasn't a place that seemed to have much room for that. I mean, it wasn't the same culture as an American university. There weren't workshops. There weren't. The writer Adam Mars Jones, I don't know if you know who he is, but he had a year-long residency where there was a sort of informal workshop that met every couple of weeks, and that he conducted. And I went a couple of times, and he was so fierce. All the rules by which a workshop is conducted in this country, the things to which one is accustomed, they didn't apply. So the person whose story was being discussed would go to the bathroom and he would say, "Oh, isn't it awful? I thought it was terrible." They go, "Well, remind me not to go to the bathroom." So the fiction front was just not really happening. There wasn't. So I signed up. I applied to places and I went to Syracuse and I think that was a moment of. I think that was a moment of my miscalculation or my not thinking things through or my not being mature enough in some way to know what was right for me. Because the thing I always tell people now when they're applying to writing programs is don't look at whether a place is prestigious, look at who teaches there and whether there's a sympathy between, you have some sympathy for your work and whether they might understand your sensibility, and be sure you apply to places where you're happy to wake up every day. And I was not aware of either of those things. I mean, I was not, I thought Syracuse, Raymond Carver taught there, how incredible, Toby Wolf teaches there, how incredible. And then I got there and it was a very small program. It was Syracuse, New York, rigorous winter. I had no car. My mother had found my apartment for me because I was in England. So she, of course, chose the one building in Syracuse with a doorman. Unfortunately, that was downtown. You had to walk. There was an elevated highway. The people, urban planners are in jail in Syracuse, because they put the highway through town. The kickbacks, they put the highway through town. So you had to walk under the highway and then up the hill through these parking lots to get to the campus. In the first month, three women were raped in those parking lots. As I say, I didn't have a car, couldn't get to the supermarket, had to shop at 7-Eleven. Just practical stuff that I hadn't really thought through. That was sort of a problem. And then in terms of the program, I feel aesthetically, wonderful writers, very different sensibility, slight, not the most nurturing, fairly male environment. Just not, I didn't feel like the little seedling that was being watered. There was one, not Toby Wolf, one of the other professors who, I felt there was a lot of resistance to where I came from and, to my background, that, the privilege of Yale. There was one of the other workshop leaders said, asked one day, what are you all doing for Thanksgiving? And there was a silence. And he said, I know what Claire's doing. Claire's going to Connecticut to have cocktail parties with her more sophisticated friends. So it just seemed like not the place for me. And I would go from Thursday, I was 22 years old, I would go from Thursday at 4 p.m. when my class ended till Monday night at 7 p.m. when my workshop started without speaking to anybody face to face. Just, ill thought through. If I was choosing between there and Michigan and Boston, if I'd chosen Ann Arbor, maybe, it just would have been a different environment. It's more of a campus, situation, and, who knows? Different, I feel like different sensibility there, or Boston, who knows? Or maybe it was just the wrong time. Maybe I'd been in school too long, so I got out. So then I went back to England and took a job in journalism. So I was working at The Guardian. I was deputy editor of The Guardian Women's Page, which was not as grand as it sounds.